Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This thread will probably 404 pretty soon, but who cares? Obviously, this is 4chan and nothing can be proven true here. This is my story, take it as you want. My English also could be a bit sloppy. Summary. I meditated until I found something 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I meditated with the goal of ascending into Buddha form or something. I was 17 and tried to achieve meditation because I thought it would be cool, or I can be some sort of superhuman. Yeah, teenage delusion mixed with late manga affliction. Unfortunately, I was successful with this meditation. I tried some sort of well tactic I read online. Breath deep, count to 10 while in and exhaling, and you will slip. It worked. I fell into a strange state that led me deeper and deeper. Things started materializing, but it wasn't real in the widely understood sense. There were trillions of bubbles. I could dive into them and found a new layer. Layer after layer, I explored as deep as I could. I didn't even think about it anymore. I just went layer after layer, like a Mandelbrot fractal, just in the form of bubbles. I can't say if I went into them or further out. In other words, I can't tell if the bubbles became of bigger proportions or smaller. I thought it was endless, until the layers' form changed. The bubbles in each layer became fewer and fewer, until there was only one bubble left. Around it, there was only darkness. In this bubble, I didn't go in, but rather was sucked in. There was some kind of entity in there. If I would have to describe it, I would say it was a child composed of darkness with white eyes. A bit like a primordial fetus. Yeah, sounds cheesy when I describe it in words. This thing told me something. I only can remember it as the most horrible truth in existence and lost all hope there. It told me something about God. It was either about God's existence or God's nature. I was devastated and noped out there. The journey backwards didn't take as long. When I came to the surface again, I kind of wanted to bury this truth in my subconscious. Careful, the cheesiness will intensify now. I built a metaphorical palace above that surface of my subconscious, so that this truth will never again reach me, still in trance-like state. I knew it was a truth without a doubt, but I wanted to forget it. There was no lie in the child's message, that much I knew. But I had to bury it under something with metaphorical beauty. The next day, everything was fine. 2 weeks later, my subconscious did crumble, though. One moment to the next, it was like some sort of mist faded, and I could see the reality as it was. The forms and geometry didn't change, and I had no illusions. It was just that suddenly the illusion of existence became clear. That completely devastated me. It wasn't pretty and Buddha-like. It was horrifying and eventually led to me being psychologically unstable for about 1 year. After 1 year, the mist faded into my reality again and allowed me to return to a semi-normal life. 10 years later, I write this message. I'm a graduated economist and don't believe in esoterics, astrology, or magic. I would describe myself as agnostic as well. I still don't know what to make of this happening, though. It almost destroyed my sanity. I don't want to know what lies behind reality anymore and prefer a comforting illusion of life and reality.
The bad thing about meditation is self-suggestion, through imagery of thought and emotion. If you don't know what you're doing, you could literally have a bad trip, plus having an idea planted in your head and thus grown like a seed grows to a flower and then blossoms. The exact opposite of what actual meditation is supposed to do. I don't want to be the party pooper here, but meditation as a tool can be both constructive and destructive if used improperly. If you find yourself still unsettled by what you've done, I would suggest looking into it further rather than leave a black stain in your psyche. I assure you, the last thing creation and existence is meaningless.
Sounds a lot like ego death. Thanks for sharing, OP. Here's a mystical experience I had. I was visiting my then girlfriend's family in Mexico, and we were staying for a day in Mexico City before catching our flight back to the States. While wandering the streets, we encountered a shrine to Santa Muerte, whose cult fuses pagan and Catholic influences and has gained popularity in wake of the drug war's violence. I was fascinated by this exotic altar and investigated it more closely. I confess I touched it out of curiosity and couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding the contact initiated within me for the rest of the day. As we laid in our hostel bunk beds that night, I began experiencing chills which signaled an oncoming fever. I wasn't concerned that anything supernatural was happening. I simply felt like I was coming down with a flu and dreaded the prospect of flying while ill. However, my apprehension toward flying soon escalated to a more extreme tenor. I felt like my mind was being bombarded with evil thoughts that I could not control. In my mind's eye, I saw corpses, torture devices, and other macabre scenes. Unable to dispel these thoughts, I felt as though I was being enveloped in darkness. In my mind, I could see myself standing on a checkerboard floor with blackness hanging like a thick fog all around me. Before I continue, I will note that what I'm about to explain happened as though it were a dream, yet a dream that I was consciously aware of. That is, I perceived all these images in my mind while simultaneously being aware that I was lying on a bed in a Mexican hostel. In this dream realm, I was approached by an entity composed of two feathery wings supporting an African man's head. This apparition told me his name was Jerome and that he was my guardian angel. He took me to the edge of an enormous canyon that looked like it was in the American Southwest and told me to follow him. He explained that if I prayed, I would be able to walk across the canyon and meet him on the other side. By following his instructions, I was able to reach the other side where I found myself standing upon a Mayan pyramid. There were other pyramids which were all connected by narrow bridges, every pyramid seemingly suspended above in an infinite white expanse. I cautiously began walking across one of these bridges when I saw an image of the Virgin de Guadalupe standing on the other side. However, as I stared at the image more intently, it burst into a cloud of inky smoke that quickly dissipated. I finished crossing the bridge and was confronted by an immeasurably tall and steep set of stairs which disappeared into the white haze above me. Also waiting for me at the stairs was an Asian man who appeared to be the same age as me, who said his name was Lee. We began traversing the stairs together until we reached a height to where it was completely white both above and below us. I suggested that we might travel faster if we helped each other. We placed our arms across each other's shoulders and quickly reached the top, traveling in this manner. Lee disappeared, and I was surrounded by incredibly tall and thin figures whose features were entirely concealed beneath their enormous robes. These angelic beings lead me to an old man who asked me if I had any good ideas about why I'm here. I told him all my ideas were wicked, and the only good I knew came from God. He said my answer was impressive, and I confessed ashamedly that his comment had made me proud. He invited me to play the board game Battleship with him. He easily beat me and then asked me to watch how he played. He showed me that if he tried to put a white peg, signifying a miss, into the board, the peg would either be repelled from the board as if by magnetism or dissolve into sand in his hand. He explained that this was what it is like being perfect. He sent me down a stone hallway that was lit by torchlight into an empty stone room with a simple wooden bed in it. Upon entering, the stone room suddenly changed into a richly ornate room with white walls adorned with mirrors surrounded by gold rococo frames. The simple wooden bed transformed into an extravagant bed with white fur sheets upon which lay a naked woman with golden hair and gold strewn across her pink flesh. The room fluctuated between the simple stone and extravagant white, depending on which vision I concentrated my focus on. By prayer, the white room with the nude woman was dispelled, and I was left in the bare stone room. I was soon visited by another apparition, which consisted of a man's head with a long white beard resting upon a tangle of fleshy tentacles. The entity said he was Poseidon, and I asked him what he was doing here. He told me that we, which I took to mean all the pagan gods, all served him. He then gave me a plain wooden crozier and asked me if I was a virgin. I said no, and he took the crozier from me and said that it was not for me. In its stead, he gave me a wooden shield with an image of the Virgin de Guadalupe's face on the outside, and then he led me back into another hallway. As with the room, the stone hallway would fluctuate to a white ornate hallway with gold buttresses and lavish golden-framed paintings of fruit adorning each panel. Prayer again dispelled the Versailles-like hallway, and I walked up the stone stairs and emerged on a platform. All around me was white like the pyramid landscape earlier, and at a distance from me on the platform stood the image of the Virgin de Guadalupe. As I walked towards her, she changed into my girlfriend. When I looked at her, she burst into a cloud of smoke from which emerged several large black snakes which lunged at me. I protected myself with the shield Poseidon gave me. I peeked over the shield's lip and saw that the snakes had been replaced by an image of my mother, and black smoke was spinning all around her. I watched with dreadful fascination as the swirling smoke gradually tightened its path until it threatened to consume us. A small voice asked me what I was waiting for, and in response I cried out to God. Suddenly, a giant crucifix several stories high fell from the whiteness above and impaled the ball of smoke, dissipating it instantly. A giant Christ hung on the cross and told me that evil was gone for now, but its ultimate defeat must wait for another day. The platform below me disappeared, and I fell through the whiteness until I landed in my bed. I awoke the next morning with a 104-degree fever and was placed under the care of the airport's nursing staff when I failed to reach the restroom during a particularly bad wave of nausea.
You should ease on the drugs, mate.
I wasn't on drugs.
Then it was a fever dream gone wild. What is astonishing, though, is the level of detail with which you describe it. Imagine how much of an impression it made to you. Your brain plays right into your emotions, fears, passions, ideas, and ideals. That's what the brain does. Imagine how many wondrous dreams we could remember if only we trained our brains harder to remember them. I've lived 2 entire lives on 2 different occasions, just to wake up a few hours later.
My brain was definitely involved, but so was my spirit. Please understand me if you can.
My friend, it is impossible to understand you, as I don't have the experiences you have. However, what I can do is tell you that your brain is the tool, your spirit is you. Both are interconnected and thus affected. If your spirit is the spring of water, the mind is the thirsty traveler drawing from it. Both are involved in the game, both affected. So you are right in that. However, do not underestimate the power of your flesh bag to affect your spirit. After all, that is its purpose.
I don't support psychedelics. Traditional spiritual methods are much better, and the CIA were told by Tavistock Institute to promote them to mainstream society. But here are some things that can happen. You have an ego that says, I am an IT worker, I own fancy clothes that make me better than other people, I have a charismatic personality, I have a fear of violence. The drug randomly destroys parts of your ego, and so your personality changes. So after the trip you think, being an IT guy isn't a real personality, so I have lost part of my identity. I no longer give a damn about the clothes I wear. I no longer have any charisma because I see charisma as a hollow mask. I no longer have a fear of violence and will no longer take protective measures in some situations. So there is just random destruction of the ego, and you have no idea what part of it isn't going to return. Taken to its extreme, you become a vegetable for months or even years. The part of the ego that's being destroyed isn't even what is being recommended by many spiritual traditions. One religion might be recommending to remove excessive amounts of selfishness, but unbothered if you have a charismatic personality and find meaning in your career. So for spiritual development, traditional religious paths are much better. A lot of the big insights people get on psychedelics are pretty simple stuff, actually. They realize they need to find God, they need to value their relationships, and they need to take care of their health. Pretty simple stuff. And they didn't need drugs to realize that. Once basic messages like that are realized, there's nothing else to be gained. The drug will only take away parts of the ego. Sometimes things that are valuable. The ego grows back in time, though. You just have to wait it out. It can take a long time to gain a charismatic personality back after seeing through the mask that it is.
Yes, the world is rigged against you. But not for the reason you think. It's rigged against you to force you to evolve. It's putting obstacles in front of you in hopes of getting you to climb them, or better, learn to make a ladder. When you've made it over the obstacle, there's another one waiting for you, this time taller. It will always be like this. To be specific, the world will test your attachment. It will test it by taking what you have grown comfortable with, whether that is situations or loved ones. This is because the highest form of evolution is to be unfettered by worldly things, to be unmovable by changes in this ephemeral world. This ephemeral world is not insignificant. But it isn't significant either. It is only as significant as you allow it to be. This can work for or against you. Make it work for you. You must become unattached to the ephemeral. This doesn't mean you must dislike it, or even cease to enjoy it. But you mustn't suffer its disappearance when it's time to let it go. All things come and go. Your comfort is no exception. There will be many times when you have no comfort in this life. No quiet. No rest. But you cannot let this affect your mental state. Because there are things that are out of your control. Things that cannot be helped, even if you wail and fill yourself up with disdain and hatred and sadness. So we can choose. Will we suffer the inevitable, or will we work with it and make the most of it? Will we try our hardest, every second of every day, to not be at the mercy of uncontrollable circumstances, but instead to face it unmoved as if we were a large stone in a raging river? You can even try to gain control over things. But you must not suffer this experience. You cannot cry if you fail. Make the effort, but stay detached from the outcome. This might sound cheesy, but this is the truth. The world will hurt you, but only so long as you let it. The evolved seem crazy, they can smile even when they've lost everything.
I see what you're saying, but I don't know about the evolution part. It's just the ego that evolves in your life. Then when you realize it's all bullshit, you get the idea to focus your efforts to get rid of this ego. So once you've done that, how can you talk about non-attachment and attachment? Because if you've had ego death and you're the self now, you're totally at peace, and there's no philosophy anymore. You've overcome the world. Everything is petty from that point on. So what you're saying seems to be some philosophy regarding how to make your ego behave as you struggle with depressions and miseries. Then the ego is happy again, and that game is rigged. Just ignore the ego and its emotions and put it to an end. There's no evolution, it's bullshit. When you have a dream at night and you evolve, is that something to be taken seriously?
I didn't mention ego once in my post. It sounds like your ego is consumed by this idea that everything works based on ego, which is just a vague word made up by psychologists that has nothing to do with traditional spirituality. What I'm saying isn't a philosophy either. It's a fact. The truth of the matter is that physical existence is predicated by time, and thus physical existence is ephemeral by nature. This has nothing to do with ego. You say that it's just the ego that evolves in your life, but that's simply factually incorrect. If anything, your concept of ego is one of the few ways of framing the complex amalgamation that is the human in a way so as to make it appear that it does not evolve. This is because what you call ego is based on conservation and self-defense, whereas evolution, by definition, requires one to go beyond preserving the status quo. You equate ego death to being totally at peace. You should ask yourself what you mean when you use the term ego death. You say once you're at peace there's no philosophy. This is false. Philosophy is simply a frame with which to view the world. Usually this involves the ego for humans, because the way it is pertinent to a human is through the ego. But that doesn't mean someone at peace cannot peacefully consider various philosophies, though it will hold no bearing on them. That's what being unfettered means. Nothing has any hold on you. You can still entertain concepts and philosophies. Being unfettered isn't a mental handicap where all of the sudden you can't use your brain. Simply the when and how is completely within your control, and unswayed by outside forces. You seem to me anyways, obsessed with ego and ego death. You seem against the idea of progress. That's fine. Do as you will. Believe what makes you feel better. I don't aim to convince anyone of anything. I'm just stating simple facts. Whether you believe them or not is up to you.
From my experience, and from what I've heard from others, it's not one and done. It doesn't happen by accident. It's something you have to work at, put a lot of effort into, over a long-ass period of time, and it never really stops. It's something you must continually put effort into. Yes, over time it gets easier. Yes, it may even become almost automatic for you. But you will always risk slipping backwards if you don't stay on top of it. Lastly, the one thing I agree with is using the term ego death. Like, in my humble opinion, yes, that's possible. But like, for experts, that's like the final plateau. For most plebs like you and me, we should be aiming for simply learning to control it, to take it out of the driver's seat. After a long-ass time, if you keep this up and you feel you want to go more hardcore, then by all means, go for it. But going for ego death right off the bat is like learning to play a sport and expecting you will immediately be at the national or international level.
Ego death is accepting oneness of the soul. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. The ego being self. Ego death equals identifying self in all or no self comparatively. Those who are against it are reliant on ego because they think they're special. There are levels, of course, like a monk who might deny desires of self for spiritual fulfillment, but the goal of ego death is acceptance of being one with the entire universe. For anyone scared of losing their ego, you basically trade it for an upgraded one that allows you more power than a single self ever had, and your body becomes universal to compensate. Compared to someone who is pure ego, a person who identifies with the entire universe would seem like they are pure ego equally, because the importance of an egoless self dwarfs the ego through magnitude. It's an upgrade, in my opinion, to become one with the universe. All things connected equals ego death. I suppose it's paradoxical in the end, for your being assumes the entire universe and appears ego. But perhaps it's just optimal housing of spirit to associate with the entire universe, an infinite conceptual self-parallel of all life versus a self-deluded value of importance otherwise.
Let me actually tell you how to do it. You need to not give up on everything first. Ego death is a long process that takes years to achieve, if not decades. So live your life as you must until you are ready. Start with Stoicism. All you need is the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, the philosophy of it is what it is, and learn to say I don't care and mean it. Once you are stoic enough, again this takes years, you can advance further if you still want your full ego death. At this stage, you can give up on the small things like hygiene and appearance unless they make you uncomfortable. Give in to comfort again after your stoic journey and live to fulfill your base human urges besides that of boredom. Although Stoicism should help you handle being bored a little, meditation is absolutely a must as well, as entertainment feeds the ego. Also begin to empty your life from everything material that isn't a necessity. Now you will live an empty life with barely anything but what is needed. You should be at the level that you will not even move if a bus came speeding at you at 100 miles per hour, because you now don't exist as a human, but as a creature with no center, no thoughts away from his natural state, and when you are ready, you must lose your home, sell it, donate it, pass it down, or just leave. Whatever you want, just get it gone and keep nothing in return for it. You will own nothing, as the concept of ownership is a remnant of the ego of man in his search for safety and security. Now you are a bum, homeless, living wherever you want, taking only what you need as a drone of what once was humanity, who is at peace with his life being seen as bad within greater humanity. Most men who achieve this end up committing self-immolation, as they feel nothing and fear nothing and use their peace to aid humanity further. See the many acts of protest by monks over the years. They were ready, and so will you be if you want. The only other option is to live until dead.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.